Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to this week's edition of the PD16 Perspective. I am your host, John Reid, editor of the show, and we'd like to thank the LCPM network for making this all possible. And we want to prepare you each week to give you the knowledge you need to disarm weapons of mass distraction. And in this week's episode, we want to talk about the mask mandate. Has Governor Youngkin finally got his victory lap when it comes to the mask mandate and for the parental option? We want to talk about the battle for voting rights. Is democracy on its deathbed when it comes to felons getting a second chance? In this week's interview, we're going to be talking with Apostle Larry Brown of Spirit Deliverance Church and how he's involved in the community and what can communities of faith do to get more involved. And also, we're going to talk about, even with Black History Month, other cultures may finally get their opportunity to be represented in schools when it comes to their curriculum. Join us, won't you? And let us prepare you to be ready for the battles ahead. Recently, Senate Bill 739 was passed with an amendment in the Senate. And one of the things that Governor Youngkin has been pushing for with one of his executive orders was that he wanted to give parents the option. Now, it's very interesting because when he came in, as he was inaugurated, that was one of the first things that he pushed for. Of course, he wanted to ban something which isn't being even taught in public schools in terms of critical race theory. But see, one thing Lord Youngkin also wanted to do was he wanted to give people the choice to determine whether their kids are not wore masks. Now, if you've been watching whether it's school boards in Spotsylvania, Stafford, or in other areas of PD16, you've been noticing a lot more people showing up without masks and saying, well, it's my right. Well, that may be true, but here's the thing. And I want to read you first a statement from the president of the Virginia NAACP and what he stated as far as the response to Senate Bill 739. And I want to talk about the individual who was behind that and the problems that entailed as a result. Here's what President Robert N. Barnett Jr. said. It is disappointing to the Virginia NAACP that Senator Chap Peterson would put forth such an amendment that would knowingly harm the health and safety of our children, teaching staff, and staff personnel in schools. His sly tactics will now increase the odds that hundreds of thousands of Virginia's children may spread and contract COVID-19 while in school. Well, for those who may not know about fair Senator Chap Peterson, let me give you a little history lesson, shall we? During the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, one of his most popular statements was that while he was on a show, he said that schools were better during the Jim Crow era than they ever were during the pandemic. He was also an individual that supported the Washington Commanders keeping their former racist name, which has been held since the days of the late owner George Allen. So it was not a surprise that Chap Peterson, a person who cares very little about communities of color, would push this amendment through. And as a result, now Lord Youngkin has his victory lap. See, here's what people have to understand, that while people may have a choice, there's also a decision that people have to make in terms of supporting those who are without, because we do know in the COVID-19, communities of color are the ones that are disproportionately affected, and they are facing discriminatory barriers when it comes to their health. So these are the issues that we have to understand. So hopefully we are urging the House to reject Senate Bill 739 and do what's right by the people. That people like Senator Peterson cannot get away with these tactics, because if they do, your community will be impacted next. Last week, a Republican House of Delegates killed a bill that pending constitutional amendment that will automatically restore voting rights to felons once they regain their freedom. Well, on this show, recently we talked with Juanita Shanks, the president and founder of Fail-Safe Era, and she talked a lot about the need to give restored citizens their opportunities at a second chance, especially when it comes to the voting booth. But what has happened with this committee, and I'm going to read this report to you, that if this holds, according to the report, the decision will prevent Virginia voters from weighing in on the issue in a referendum this fall. Now, we all know that communities of color are the ones that are most affected when it comes to being in jail. The prison pipeline system predominantly affects Black and brown individuals and limits their opportunities at having a second chance at a better life. This is why the battle for voter rights cannot end. This is something that when we talked about a month ago, Conversations on the Bridge led by the Spotsylvania NAACP, it was imperative that people get out and support and fight for voting rights. This is why with the upcoming Livingston District special election coming up tomorrow, it's imperative that people go out and vote. Vote for the candidate of your choice, but make sure you get out, because voter suppression is something that is real. Is, as Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris said of the Poor People's Campaign, our democracy is at a deathbed. And if we don't give felons the opportunity to get their voting rights back, then the rest of us are under siege. This is why we need to support making sure that people who have served their time get an opportunity. As Delegate Charnel Herring once said in a statement, it's about not just giving people a second chance, it's about faith and forgiveness. Are we willing to give people the forgiveness they need in order to make their voices heard in our democracy? Recently, we had an opportunity to speak with one of Stafford's newest citizens in Apostle Larry Brown of the Spirit of Deliverance Truth Church. And he talks about the community activities that he participated in, and also his views on what the church can do to further participate and let their voices be heard. Here now is our interview with Apostle Larry Brown. Welcome to the PD16 Perspective. I am your host, John Reid, and joining us today is a distinguished member of both the Prince William and now Stafford County communities, Apostle Larry Brown, the senior pastor of Spirit of Truth Deliverance Church, and a community advocate. Apostle, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today, sir?
I'm feeling great, Elder Reid. Excited, and I definitely appreciate the invitation. Just to share what's on my heart, what's in my spirit. It is truly very exciting times. Despite what we may hear and see, God is still on the throne, and his kingdom is moving forward.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about just, you made your recent relocation to Stafford. And can you talk about what that experience has been like since you've been in the county?
Okay. Well, I've been in the county for a number of years. I've owned 2 properties in Stafford County, Stafford specifically. So when we say relocate, what I've done is relocate my ministry, Spirit of Truth Deliverance Church, which was in Dumfries for about 7 years. And then we were in Woodbridge prior to that, because we've been around come April 22 years. So my experience with Stafford now, I know a lot of pastors, a lot of churches. I have supported some things in the Stafford community, but you're talking about Spirit of Truth Deliverance Church actually meeting in person now in an actual church building and have a great relationship, partner relationship. So I anticipate using that location, that facility, not just inside the building, but the outside grounds, all of that, to promote the kingdom of God, continue to work with all of the great people and organizations that are doing so much. There may be an opportunity where I can say, come to this particular location for voter rights, for voter registration, whatever, vaccine instruction. To me, the sky's the limit. And I've been saying this for a number of years. If you have a larger space, you can just do more. When you have a small space, your thinking is limited because you always go to the space. So I plan to maximize my space in Stafford, my new opportunities in Stafford, and just do more for the community in general, all the while promoting the kingdom of God.
Absolutely. And speaking of that expansion, sir, you've recently joined the Stafford NAACP.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did, and I should have done it a long time ago, I admit. But I was invited to be on the panel, and the panel basically discussed critical race theory. So I had to do a crash course myself personally before coming on. They had great educators, doctors, and not just from the Stafford or Virginia area. And my portion was to communicate as a community leader, being a pastor and such. And Bishop Lacey, whom I have a great relationship with, posed several questions. But at the end, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is what we're saying to, being this Black History Month, and we should know our Black history. But unfortunately, we don't, because we don't put that time and energy in it. And so I made a pledge at that particular panel saying that because the question was posed, well, what am I doing personally to educate my membership on Black history? And I said, well, honestly, I need to do more. And I said, I could not tell you what that more is at the moment. But since that particular meeting, that panel, everything that the staff at NAACP sends out on Facebook, I get it and I forward it. Because my, if you want to call it, my following or my Facebook friends is nearly 5,000, and they're global. So I feel like it's my duty now to push the information out as soon as I get it. I read the information, I internalize the information. And then one last thing I learned, and I learned this from Pastor Allen, Felicia Allen, Copy Fellowship, and a great woman of God, chaplain. And she pointed out that if you really look at your Bible, Black history is throughout the Bible. Yes. So they don't need to have a special Black History Sunday or a month or whatever, because they preach it and they teach it all the time. And so I said to myself, go through the Bible and identify that, and potentially I can start teaching, I can insert into messages. But prior to that panel discussion, I was not thinking that way. You know, I just was not. And one thing I said during that panel was like, was one presentation was on shame. And, and I took it like, okay, shame on me, being a Black man in America, being a community leader, being a pastor, being this, being that I did not know certain things. I did not have a plan to educate. But I said this, and I'll be quiet. Shame need not be permanent or contagious. You just learn, you grow, you move on, you adapt. So I appreciate it, and I intend to be on future panels, and I intend to share from my 60-some years of knowledge on this earth.
And you made a great point, Apostle Brown, because you talked about just a moment ago, especially when we try to teach Black history in accordance with the Word of God. But we know, and you can go in the book of Acts when you talk about when the gospel was sent to the Ethiopian eunuch. And I've been studying this book, The Whitewashing of Christianity. It really talks about how we really, in Black communities, we understand the importance of African priests and leaders who were so central to the growth of the spread of Christianity. So that's a great point. I definitely would like to expand more on that as time goes on. So I want to talk more, transition more into talking about what you've done in the community. And as you stated, even your time in Woodbridge and Dumfries, what you're doing in Stafford now, you've done so many things to reach out and to help others, and really fulfilling the mission of Matthew 25:40, which says, what you're doing to the least of those, you're doing to me. And so by giving out, so can you elaborate, Apostle, about one of the many things that you and your congregation have done to help those in need?
I can. I want to talk about the Heart for the Community initiative, but I'll wait, because Spirit of Truth Deliverance Church was founded basically by my wife and I in our home really in 1999. And we became officially established in April 2000. So we were in the community, projecting out of a small place into the community. We were doing the regular things like back to school, giveaway kind of stuff, blessing people for Thanksgiving and for Christmas and that kind of thing. And we felt like that was the minimum we could do, even with a small budget. Matter of fact, a non-existent budget. So it was in January 2017. And I had done 3 crusades prior to that. Now I called them It's Harvest Time Crusades. My concept at that time was to gather the church people, the anointed speakers, the singers, the musicians, the altar workers, all those guys, right? And have like a 3-night service at a larger place, like a school auditorium. And after the 3rd one, I became like disappointed because I'm like, we put all this time, effort, and money, and it was supposed to be about souls, but I didn't really see any souls being saved. And so I had a meeting with a few key people, Carl Armstrong, Apostle Coates, Pastor Holland, all those guys, and a few others. And we sat around. And honestly, I was going to do the fourth crusade. But I said to that group of ministers, if you will, I really don't want to do another crusade where the church folks show up, we have a great time, we get our praise on, then we go back to our individual churches, nobody got saved. And so we brainstormed a little bit and we came up with take the heart of God to the community. That means we as Christians take the heart of God to the community. And then we started having services, meetings, gathering people. So let me fast forward, because what Spirit of Truth is doing in the community is totally aligned with what the Heart for the Community initiative is doing for the community. And this is what I want to tell people, because the Heart for the Community initiative is a group of collaborative individuals. We have 4 directors, true enough, but we have many partners with skin in the game. Then we have many just come alongside and give equipment and supplies, food, whatever, hands and feet. But when you look at what's going on over, let's say, since COVID-19 showed up, Heart for the Community had to expand its thinking. We actually changed our mission statement and our vision statement to become even more inclusive. And then with the help of Pastor Gary Holland, who's the community engagement director, he was already involved in, enough and all kinds of things. So we just collaborated. But then there were so many others. So all of a sudden, you see Heart for the Community with Spirit of Truth and a few people, so many other churches, but it's businesses, it's social services, it's medical personnel, it's everybody. Okay, and what are we doing? Community bank, we food bank, we serving stuff. What are we doing? We have many community connections. What are we doing with Heart for the Community? We have various series. Right now, we're in the Heart for You preaching series, but there's been so many series. That was not the original intent. It was not the original vision, but we realized that we must do things differently. It goes back to the concept of not staying inside the building per se. It goes to taking a look at your vision and your mission and see what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be adapted for this time. And that's why I will say that initially, Heart for the Community, in this small stage, I looked at it as an outreach wing of Spirit of Truth. No, it is so much more. It's standalone. It's 501c3. We achieved that back in 2018. Now, even as the president, I could not tell you all the things that the Heart for the Community initiative is doing these days. We're trying to plan, we're trying to raise money, we're trying to strategize, but it has taken off. And so, let me say this. I know there's other community organizations doing great things. So I'm asking your question in Spirit of Truth involvement and how that initial involvement mushroom into a greater work. And we always remind ourselves, even though we're doing things socially, we're meeting practical needs, we're making connections, we never forget that our thrust also, our mission is to win souls. So our challenge is to always somehow interject Christ, offer Christ, although we're doing all these wonderful things.
Absolutely, Apostle. And I can speak from personal experience, our time working with Heart for the Community Initiative and all the wonderful things that you've all done and being able to see the many lives that it's touched. I want to go to something you talked about just a moment ago, and just the involvement of pastors and how you've been able to get buy-in from your congregation. And like I said, with Heart for the Community Initiative, you'll be able to get businesses and other nonprofit organizations to work together. Last month, there was a conversation on the bridge that was hosted by the Spotsylvania NAACP. And one of the items that was brought up was trying to get congregations to become more active in both political and social issues. And so for those pastors who might be challenged by trying to get that buy-in, what would you say to them, to do what is necessary for them to get that kind of support, to get involved in some of these critical issues that affect our community?
Yeah, I understand your question. And even before, matter of fact, I was going to participate in that opportunity on the bridge, MLK Day, but because of weather. And I even funded a portion of that. But here's my experience, and this is what I tell pastors. Don't only look at the personnel you have in your ministry, because you may not have very many. They don't all show up at the same time. They're not all motivated to do the same thing. And I've heard many people say, well, that's a leadership failure. It is not a leadership failure. Leading is hard, but what you can do is when you realize and when you discern and you have personal communication and you know this particular person, see, that's why I get away from congregation. In the congregation, there are particular people that will help, that will come alongside. But if we say to our church on a given Sunday, I want everyone sitting here or everyone on the sound of my voice virtually to meet me at this community event, chances are that's not going to happen. So what do? We mobilize the few from each church. Then when they show up, we don't even talk about what church they came from. All we see is, wow, they heard the call, they came out because something was in them that said, hey, I must support, I must help. And I learned this over the years too, because I've asked people from other churches historically, will you help me? And I found out, and here's the danger that pastors do, they shouldn't do. I found that many people are sitting in their congregations, this was before COVID, that wanted to be utilized. They wanted to be the hand and feet. They even want to give money, right? But nobody asked them to. So when I was doing stuff in the community, especially back in 2018, 2017, we first started with our community stuff, and they would come. How can I help? How can I participate? Then at the same time, I talked to other leaders. And I says, look, if we pool resources, we'll be able to do more together than sitting there saying, well, I don't have but so many people. I don't have but so many dollars. Historically, I've said, let's pool resources. Let's work together. Not everyone caught on to that because, see, some wanted to go with the old model. They would say, well, you keep talking about community, but all I see is spirit of truth out there. So I was like, we sponsored it, but I'm telling you, not all the spirit of truth is there. You see us because we're saying, hey, we're the leaders, we're the promoters of this. We have to show up. And so, but some would say, well, why don't you do the every fifth Sunday fellowship service? We're not talking about fifth Sunday fellowships. I'm sorry. I'm not talking about church stuff, honestly. I'm not talking about the fellowship. I'm not bashing it either. But I was like, we got to do more than that. How many times fifth Sunday come around in a year, okay? What are you going to do the other Sundays, the Saturdays, the weekdays? So I know that was a long answer, but the reason why I give the answer because I have the experience of motivating a few at my own church in that work. I have the experience of, thankfully, some people from somebody else's church, if we put it that way, they help. I have the benefit and the pleasure of developing relationships where I could talk to pastors. I could talk to across all races, by the way. This thing about going across the aisle politically, I have been doing it, working with pastors of different denominations and races and creeds and colors. I've done that long before all this discussion about, the church needs to change. The church has always been universal. The church has always been global. They're in every country doing great things. So I would just encourage the pastors to say, get that 2 or 3 faithful and work with them. Continue trying to motivate the other, but don't just overlook the 2 or 3 and say, well, we can't do nothing because we only have 2 or 3.
And kind of breaking that paradigm that churches operate in a silo when they are actually the community. And like I said, being the hands and feet. We got a couple of minutes left, Apostle. I want to ask this question, something that you and I talked about prior to this segment. And you talked about the need for the church to kind of break down the four walls. And it's just not just be focusing on being a building, but really being an outreach mechanism to the communities. And so how are we able to do that? We become less focused on just coming together in a building and really being the hands and feet that we're called to be.
My take on that would be, first of all, stop having a discussion about the church is the building. It's not. It never has been. Look at what you're doing at that particular space or structure or whatever. People could be meeting in their house. The question is, what are you doing in your house? What are you doing in the workplace? Look, you could be taking a tent or tents out to an outdoor activity. That's some kind of shelter. So it's not that. So what we need to do is change the narrative and say, and we need to ask ourselves the question, I'm physically here with X personnel, with X dollars and X resources. What can I do during COVID, worldwide pandemic, which is very serious? What can we do now to do ministry? We know we can do it so through various social media platforms, and that's not new. We know, I'll give you one example that Pastor Gary Holland espoused a few weeks ago. He said that the morning hour prayer, 12 years running, that's been going on. They streamed it out to maybe 3 platforms, but that's not the issue. What they've done is built interest where people will call in at 6 o'clock in the morning for prayer. Mm-hmm. Then they have to, who's going to volunteer to pray this weekend and that week, whatever. See, that's the ministry to people calling around the world, around the US. That's the ministry using social media. So we've proven that you could be at your home. You don't have to turn your camera on, with your phone, with your desktop, doing ministry. That's not at the church. That's at your house at 6 a.m. We've proven that at Bible study, you could do a Zoom and kick it out to Facebook. You can also kick it out to YouTube. So that's doing ministry. It has nothing to do with the building. And if we think for a second, how often were we going to the church building anyway? We had maybe a weekday for Bible study, a Sunday, right? And if anything else was going on, it was like, maybe a prayer meeting or something. Maybe we had a choir rehearsal. We were not in the building that much anyway, okay? So now that we know that, let's do everything using social media, word of mouth, in person, at the 7-Eleven, whatever. Let's just talk about ministry. Let's be loving and caring towards people. That's when you will see this evangelistic explosion beyond the talk. And you'll find out, even though I'm talking a lot today because I'm motivated, normally I tell people I don't even like talkers because I'm a doer. I talk first and I do. And in that doing requires faith. In that doing requires sacrifice. In that doing, it requires activity. In that doing, it requires you motivate by saying, the Spirit of the Lord. I gotta stop. It jumped up in me. So I'm gonna stop. I know you said we don't have that much time.
Oh no, that's going to right. But thank you, Apostle. And it's true. And I think that what you have done, and I can, like, again, being that I've been on the morning hour of prayer, I know it's really powerful to get that encouragement, especially in the times that we are. So thank you. I'm so honored to take time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today. Can you real quick just tell people where they can find Spirit of Truth in the church?
Happy to do that. We're physically located at 550 Joshua Road in Stafford, zip code 22556. But as I just stated, we're only there on Sundays right now in person at 10 a.m. and where we live stream our services. So if you really want to know what's going on with Spirit of Truth, you have to go to the Spirit of Truth Facebook page, because that's where we post all of our, if it's teaching, the video is there. You can do the playback. Anything special is going to be loaded to the Facebook page. If you go to our website, it's going to direct you to a lot of stuff. But you get the notification when you like the Spirit of Truth Facebook page. So we're easy to find, and I would say, come on down because we're preparing a meal for you, a spiritual meal, a word of God just for you. So come on by 550 Joshua Road, Stafford, Virginia, 22555.
People will definitely get filled by that.
556.
It was great. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Apostle Larry Brown, the senior pastor of Spiritual Deliverance Church and member of Stafford NAACP, sir. Thank you once again. Thank you for all you've done in the community, for Heart for the Community Initiative, Spirit of Truth, and for the morning hour of prayer. Thank you again, sir.
You know this. I know your father, Bishop Reid. I know how he's helped me over the years, encouraging me. And so I want to give a shout out to him. And I'm sure he's proud of you and what you were doing. God bless you.
It's such an honor. God bless you, Apostle. Thank you so much once again. And on behalf of the PD16 perspective, this has been our interview with Apostle Larry Brown, the Spirit of Truth Deliverance Church. We'll be right back. Thank Apostle Brown for taking an opportunity to talk with us. And make sure you check out his church, Spirit of Truth, the Spirit of Deliverance Truth. And finally, what we want to talk about is in Black History Month, we often schools like to portray B1 activities. They like to portray the heroes of that community. But now there's an opportunity for other cultures to get finally their history, their technology, their stories written in school curricula. Delegate Nadarius Clark, who back in November became the youngest delegate ever voted to the House of Delegates at age 26, is now pushing for a new bill to take place and it'll become law that will allow AAPI, Latino, and Indigenous students to finally learn more about their history and their culture. And I'm going to read just a few things. Out of the 400 standards and substandard courses in American and Virginia civic and history courses, only 10 standards reference AAPI, Indigenous, and Latino courses in their curriculum. If this bill goes through and does become law, it will create an advisory board, which will open the doors for AAPI, Latino, and Indigenous history classes to be included in curricula. This is in addition to the African American history courses that are already in effect, in fact, from Stafford down to Spotsylvania. This is an opportunity for more people to learn about their culture, because an expanded culture, a culture is an advanced one. And so we encourage this to come through and be able to support HB 1179. That is all for the PD16 perspective. I am your host, John Reid. Make sure you get out and vote if you live in the Livingston district. And remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. Tag, you are it. Go out and be informed and arm yourself against the weapons of mass distraction. Thank you and have a great day.